Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. Just want to welcome everybody to today's session. We appreciate all of you joining today. I know there's a lot of new people joining today, as well as many who joined the session yesterday. So just want to cover a few things as we are talking about today's topic, which is about understanding Geopath's two new data products, so that one of being re-released earlier in the week, and want to tell you more about that and expectations on how to use that data, etc. But first, I just want to let everybody know who's on the webinar today, and just introduce everybody with the next slide. First, I'm Scott Fischetti, SVP of Operations from Geopath, and I'm joined today by Dylan Mabin, also from Geopath, and Matthew Martimo, who's a co-founder of Intermix. And Intermix is their platform partner who's really heavily involved in developing the Insight Suite, as well as helping us develop our place-based metrics as well. And I just want to give a shout out to them and thank them for all their work on this product. They've been donating their time, energy, and expertise so that the industry could have these two new products. So I want to say thank you for that as well. And just want to jump to the next slide and just really take a few steps back before we move forward. So just to level set and revisit, Geopath impressions just are traditionally used as a forecasting metric, as it says here. And the point is that it's used in order to predict the audience delivery of an out-of-home campaign. And to do that, we use stable forecasting methods of predicting traffic patterns. And and this allows us to have impressions that are accurately estimated, and they're based on these historical trends. But that said, everything changed in March of 2020 with COVID-19. So, and that is the impetus for where we are today and the products that we've just put out recently. So, and I want to talk about how the rest of the agenda goes today. And before I do talk about this slide, I always forget to do this up front, but if you do have questions as we're going through the session, please reach out in the question and answer widget in the Zoom platform. We'll do our best to answer everybody's questions, or as many questions as we can today. And we'll try to do them as much as possible in real time so they're relevant to the question that you're asking. And what we're going to do today is, in terms of the agenda, we want to walk through the new population activity dashboard that was released earlier this week. And sorry, apologies, there was a question that I saw come up. So again, we wanted to demonstrate the recently released population activity dashboard and also provide guidance on how to interpret these data. And then we'll also, near the end of the session, go into the coming product, the weekly adjusted impression reports. We'll talk about the timing for release, as well as kind of give you some background on what those impression reports are really going to be and what they're going to mean, and again, how to really think about and interpret that data. And then, as I mentioned earlier, really we'll answer all the questions that we can, and really hope we want to make sure this session is valuable for everybody participating. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dylan, who will drive much of the conversation, and Matthew and I will also join in here and there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Scott. And hello, everyone. I hope everyone's being safe and responsibly social distancing and have their face mask ready if they need to go outside. So be safe. We've released on the 14th this population activity dashboard, and we're really excited about it. We've been getting a lot of requests and a lot of questions from our members and just the out-of-home community and media community, marketing community in general, about what's going on and what can Geopath do to help understand this sort of chaos that everyone's going through. And it's quite scary, and everyone has been affected in different ways. And so this dashboard is meant to help give some direction overall about what's been going on. And it provides day-to-day information. So we're actually updating this every day with information. You can look at the activity by CBSA and state. Now, the metrics that are in here are not impressions. This is not an impression adjustment. That's the second product that we'll talk about. This product illustrates the daily miles traveled by market and by state every day in 2020. And the benchmark for comparison is the average daily miles traveled for all of 2019. Now, the reason why we are using a 2019 benchmark is because the Geopath metrics that we provide, the forecast for 2020 was built in 2019. And so based upon when that was built and the trajectory of how we saw traffic trending, we're using that moment in time as a baseline versus what we're seeing today. So our product is an annual average. And so these metrics are based upon an annual average metric of daily miles traveled. Again, these are not impression metrics. These are just daily mile traveled by CBSA and by state. And the data, again, is updated every day. So this is very awesome. So some information about the dashboard. What should you use this for? You should use this to understand the trends within the market that you're analyzing. And the reason why we broke this down by market and by state is because the federal government, state governments, local governments have all responded to this this pandemic in different ways and at different times and with different levels of severity, and the travel behavior has adjusted accordingly. And there's some interesting trends that we'll see as we dig into it. And the other intended use of this is to understand how that, of course, has happened across the country at the local level, but also so that we can understand when we all start coming out of this. And the idea is that every market's going to behave slightly differently. There's already been some guidelines set by the president about how we are going to start opening up the country and when that's going to occur and how that's going to occur. So we're going to start seeing these same things happen in the reverse. Things are going to come back up. We're not all going to stay like this forever. And we will start seeing things return to a new normal. And as that happens, you'll be able to use this to understand this in a much more fast cadence and daily cadence than some of the other products that we're going to be talking about. Now, I want to reiterate that these data are not to be used as a substitution for impression delivery. We do not want anyone to go out there and take the percentage change that they're seeing and applying that to the impression levels that they've seen for the forecast for 2020. We're working on doing that, and we will be providing ranges for our members to utilize for that purpose. But for right now, this dashboard is intended to understand activity. And the metric that we are measuring, the activity that we're measuring, is travel distance. And travel distance is not a perfect predictor of traffic volume. And traffic volumes on every roadway is what we end up using to calculate impressions for every single piece of inventory. So again, travel distance is not a perfect predictor of travel volume. You might be traveling 20 miles, but taking 10 two-mile trips versus traveling 10 miles and back. That's 5 trips on one roadway, both directions, versus 2 in either direction, and that's a big difference. So these metrics are helpful to understand sort of activity in that regard. So Scott, is there anything that you would like to reiterate or add to this discussion on the activity metrics?
Yeah, no, I think I would just really add, I do think this is one of the most important slides when thinking about the new product, and just to reiterate that these are not intended to be used as a substitution for impression delivery. And as you said, that product is coming. I do think we can't overemphasize that enough with this product.
Great. So how are we going about this? So what we're doing is we're working with our lovely partners over at Intermix, and we're taking a look at background SDK location data to understand how the population is traveling. And so we're looking at the high quality mobile devices that spit off a lot of location data and understanding those trends over time. So we can calculate the distance traveled every single day as we identify those devices, multiple hours of the day, multiple days of the week, to compare that against the activity that we saw across all devices that qualified in 2019. So it's a good baseline for comparison. So the metric that we're calculating, here's an example of distance traveled and how it may change before and after the travel restrictions. So I live over in Brooklyn, and I commute into the city and to Midtown, and I may take a trip downtown, go to a meeting, come back, go to lunch at some point, and then go home. And on a good day, travel restrictions, that's likely going to decrease severely. And we've seen quite a bit of shrinking of distances traveled for individuals, especially in the New York region. And so, again, this is sort of like a hypothetical day in the life of Dylan. Again, going for just maybe a trip around the park. So what we're seeing in some of the data, and what you will see as you open up the dashboard and start exploring, is the comparison of the travel distance versus what we're seeing every single day, and a rolling 7-day average. And I wanted to pull out 2 particular weeks in Chicago to show as an example. And so this is the rolling average of February 17th through 23rd, and the rolling average of March 30th through April 5th. And these 2 weeks are important because one happened before everything got locked down, and everything happened afterwards. And so what you're seeing is actually that the beginning of the year, we saw quite a bit of travel, even more than we were expecting, given a couple things that we've identified. One, the gas prices were incredibly low. The winter was incredibly mild, and the economy is doing very well. So people were doing quite a bit of traveling and socializing and moving about. So we actually saw an increase of the daily miles traveled every single day the first couple weeks of the year, whereas afterwards we have seen a decrease. So if you look at this red line, the 2019 daily median, or the sort of the average of the miles traveled every day for the population of Chicago, was 15.1 miles. So late February went up to 21.3. Now it's down to 6.7. So there are some fluctuations in every market, up and down, that you'll see when you start opening up this dashboard. So this is an important distinction, that everything is against a baseline from 2019. So let's take a look.
Just as you're doing that, Dylan, we just got a question that I can answer for everybody right now. The question is, where do you actually find the dashboard? Is it in the Geopath Insights suite? So right now, currently, you can find it right on our homepage of our website. If you go to geopath.org and just scroll down a little bit, you'll see more information on it and a link to directly right to the product as well. And Dylan,
there you go. All right, so went to our website, and you can see we have a little section here about the new data product. And so you can click to view the new dashboard, take you to the URL travel.geopath.io. And so in this dashboard, for those that have used Tableau, this may be a little bit familiar. For those of you who have not, this interface might be a little bit new. So I'm going to show you how to navigate through it, how to interact with it, and show you what's what and how to interpret some of these things. So there's 4 different pages that you can view in this site. There is the CBSA Explorer. And so what we have on the map here are all of the metropolitan CBSAs across the country. And you can click on a CBSA and get some information on it. I'll do that in a second. So in addition to the CBSA Explorer, which has this sort of landscape view of the map and the charts, you also can open this up and get a CBSA report, which is more of a portrait view, and you have your map as well as some of the charts down here. So same thing goes for the state report and the state explorer, similar layouts. So what I'll do here, I can hold the shift button down and click on the map, and you can pan the map around, and you can zoom in, you can zoom out with the little buttons on the map, super helpful. You can also use the wheel on your mouse if you choose to do so. And you can click on the map, as I said, to pull up information on the charts for a particular market. So this market that I just selected was the New York market, and you can see how the activity actually was higher than expected for an annual average in the first couple of weeks of the year, going all the way till the second week of March, and then travel restrictions happened, and then we now are at this much more stable lower point right now that we're seeing in New York. And then I think one of the reassuring things that we're seeing in a lot of the country is that things have in fact stabilized for many markets. Some are still trending, but you'll be able to see that as you explore. And instead of just looking at one market, you can, while you are hovering over the map, you can hold the control key down and select other markets. So I'm going to do that here, select Dallas. I'm going to look at Minneapolis, St. Paul. Let's see how Charleston's doing. And this is a great example of some of the changes that we're seeing and how they're different by market. So the three different charts that you're seeing here, the first one is the percentage change versus the 2019 annual average, right? So this is the 0% is if all things were the same as the 2019 average, and various days of the year, you're seeing up and down throughout. And this is built off of the 7-day rolling average in miles. And so you have the miles here on the left in the second chart, and different markets just are different sizes. People travel by different modes. In New York, a lot of people are densely centered around the 5 boroughs, so they don't necessarily need to travel that far in the first place. Might be using public transportation, things like that. Versus other markets like Charleston and Dallas, where people live in suburbs far away, rural areas, and then they commute into the city for commuting patterns, or you may even need to drive 15, 20 miles just to go shopping. So the travel patterns are different by market, and what's nice about this percentage change, you can see everything sort of normalized for that particular market's average annual travel distance. And so what's interesting here is you can see that New York drops off quite considerably from a percentage standpoint, whereas the market of Charleston, which was also seeing higher travel in the beginning of the year, sees a decrease, but it's not nearly to the severity that you're seeing in other larger metropolitan areas. And then the last chart is the information broken out by day. And so every day of the week, as we all know, weekend behavior is very different from weekday behavior. Weekend behavior is very different from weekday behavior, and even the days of the weekend are very different. So you can see Sundays, generally the lowest activity day as people are taking a break. So there's a couple other ways that you can interact with the map. You can click on the map and draw a rectangle and see a couple different markets at once that way. That's pretty cool. Now, one of the fun things that we've seen in California is that around the last week of February, the governor actually issued a state of emergency. And so California as a state started seeing some travel changes that other states didn't see. So we can go over here, we can select all of Florida, or most of Florida, and you can see you're not seeing that pattern, which is pretty interesting. Whereas Miami, as we all know, Miami is one of the most densely populated cities in the country, and also had quite an outbreak of the coronavirus there. So you're seeing unique patterns by city or metropolitan area. Similarly, you can go to the state level, and so we'll pull up the State Explorer so we can see a slightly different view. And you can, in this case, we've got all the states. I'm going to select all of the states and see how this crunches. My computer didn't quite like this last time.
Dylan, as you're waiting on that, I just had a couple of questions come in that I think would be good to talk about. Quick clarification question: is the miles traveled per person, per vehicle, per what?
Good question. That's per person, and the reason that it's a per person metric is that we're looking at mobile device activity, not vehicle activity. And so this is looking at all those different areas.
Great. And then just
so here's all 50 states on the map at once. Very different behavior in every state.
And then also just one question about the benchmark. So is the benchmark total for year 2019 versus Q1 2020 or year to date 2020? Sorry, I could restate it if you want me to restate it better.
Please restate your question. Thank you.
Yeah. Sorry.
Go ahead.
You go, Dylan. Sorry.
So the percentage change is against the 2019 annual average. So we looked at every single day of 2019 and looked at the travel behavior of every single day, and we selected the median of that. So it's the average of the entire year of 2019 as the baseline. So this particular let's see, let me go to State Explorer. Let me switch real quick. So I'm just going to select on Texas. So this particular day is 15.7 miles. So I'm looking at Sunday 119. Now, if I go to Sunday 119 up here on this middle one, this is the 7-day rolling average. And so the 7-day rolling average is compared to the 2019 annual average in the chart above. So the 7-day rolling average on Sunday 119 was 14% greater than the 2019 annual average daily miles traveled.
Great.
And the 7-day average is nice because it sort of smooths out some of the weekly fluctuations that you would see, and you can see some more of the trends as they occur. So as you can see here, Texas seems to have stabilized as a state as well.
Cool.
Oregon's seeing a little bit of a rebound already.
Great. And just as you're doing that still, there's a quick question about exporting any of this information. Is there a way to get the data in Excel, or can you?
Sure thing. Yeah, you can't export it as Excel, but you can export a report as a PDF or as an image. So I just selected all of the New England states in New York, and I'm going to go down here to the bottom, and I can click on this little download button. And again, I can download as a image, as a PDF, or as a PowerPoint. And so if I select as a PDF, or I think you get this option for all of the different exports, you can include just this particular sheets from the map, or I can just select the state map and download that. Give it a second. So you get your map. You need to double check the export, but yeah. So you can export it like that. Let me export as an image. And so there's the export as an image. Oh, you can't see that. Hold on a second, let me switch the screen. There you go. There's the export as an image.
Great.
Any other questions on the interface that I should go through? Oh, I guess some of the other things. You can select the date ranges as well on these little sliders. So rather than going back to the beginning of the year, maybe I just want to look at March 1st until today.
There are a couple of questions more on just the sourcing of the data. Like, is this mostly from cell phone data, or in how many, how big is the audience that we're looking at with this data?
Sure. So we're looking at a panel of about 70 million devices. Sorry, 10 million devices. So we're looking at every day the same panel of 10 million devices over the course of a week, so that we can get trends by day of week for the same set. And that's really helpful to do that sort of rolling average. And the data comes from mobile SDK providers, multiple mobile SDK providers, which is all that awesome information coming off of mobile phones, the opt-in of sharing your location from mobile devices. And so those aggregators are able to provide that. And so we were using that and, of course, aggregating that up anonymously to be able to come up with these metrics from that vast resource.
Cool. And then just one other question, and we may have covered this already, but maybe it's worth reiterating. Just question on, is there a way to look at this information in terms of travel versus car versus walking versus transit?
That's a good question. We do not break it out by mode of travel for this. We're just looking at the total activity, but of course, certain markets do have different inherent travel behaviors and travel modes, like New York or other areas with access to public transportation.
Okay, great. I think that's it for now.
So Geopath is going to continue monitoring these travel patterns and communicating out to our members as we are interpreting this and the sort of patterns that we're observing nationally, locally, with everyone, because we want to make sure everyone is alerted and is aware as things start to improve. And so everyone can start sharing that wonderful news when that happens. All right. So on to the second product that we are going to be releasing, which is the weekly adjusted impression reports. What many people are clamoring for is this, how did my impressions change answer, right? And that's the hard one, because while we can monitor a lot of different dimensions from mobile data very quickly, and you've seen a lot of reports out there from other data providers, what Geopath is trying to do, and what Geopath does, is measure the traffic volume for vehicles and pedestrians on individual roadways. And so getting to the number of persons on a particular stretch of road is not easy. And so we have been diligently interpreting the data, trying to figure out how to best get at that answer. And that's where we're going with this impression report. Now, rather than providing an impression per panel, we are going to provide a report that is providing a range of impression changes by geography and market and by out-of-home media format. And so in this case, we have a little example chart over here and a table of changes happening in Metropolis. And so for this part of the table, which is for March 30th through April 5th, you're seeing that Bulletin saw an average change of around 51%, up and down anywhere between 55 and 46%. And each different media type has different distributions in different areas of the market, and they're going to have different changes themselves. So I want to jump real quick into the methodology, because I think that's what a lot of people are going to be asking about, is how are you able to interpret the changes in traffic on those roadways to then calculate impressions? So we're doing this a couple ways. Again, using that same panel set of mobile devices, we are able to determine a couple different metrics that we are then using to understand travel and traffic volumes. One is, of course, the total distance that persons travel every day. This is the data that's going into that dashboard. Another is the size of the area that persons are traveling within, and as well as the volume and frequency of trips that we are observing by inventory, by area type and by road type. And I'll get into that and why those two things are important. So around the mobile device panel that we are leveraging, it's about 10 million devices to be used every day. And so we're looking at those same devices over 7 days in a week, so we get longitudinal stability. And then we want to make sure that we're observing, we're looking at devices with observable location data over multiple hours of the day, so we can either confirm that they are, those devices are staying near the place of residence, or they're traveling to go shopping or to work or whatever it may be. And also, we're looking at devices to be in that panel with a high confidence of home location. So of the hundreds of millions of devices that are observed over any given month in any of these data sets that you're hearing about out there, we're seeing all of those as well, but many of those don't really provide any useful information for these type of metrics, because you may see a device only once a month. So we're looking for devices that have a high amount of location information coming off of them, so that we can understand their representativeness of those local areas and those neighborhoods, so that we can correctly project to the full population travel. That's an important distinction. So that's one of the reasons why we are seeing a smaller percentage of all of the devices being used, because we're wanting to make sure that we're looking at high quality devices. And Matthew, I'm going to loop you into this. Is there anything that you want to add to that? Because I know that you've been more hands-on with this data, and maybe I'm not articulating that well.
I think it's good, and it's important. I think your bottom bullet, that those 10 to 15% of devices are 80 to 90% of all the activity anyway. So it's the vast majority of the SDK data stream, but characterized on those highly visible devices. The other thing was that on that map, those sample sizes are shown as well. And so if anyone's curious about how much data was used in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or wherever you happen to be looking, you can see the total numbers of devices that were aggregated together. So
right. So this is
over those 7 days.
4 million devices over 7 days. Are you there? Did my audio break out?
No, perfect.
Okay.
You may proceed.
Sorry about that. Wasn't sure if my connection broke for a second. All right. So that first dimension that we talked about, we're looking at the total distance traveled. That's part of the activity dashboard. Again, how long was the path that you traveled in a given day, versus the size of the area, or the travel shed, as we've been calling it. And I think this is a really good indicator, because it sort of shows how people's worlds are really constricting. Again, you could be going a pretty far distance. I could run a marathon if I ever got my ass off the couch to do so in the park, but I'm only going to be traveling within 0.8 miles of my apartment. So distance traveled and the size of the area you're traveling within, I think, is an important metric. So we're looking at that as well to make sure that things are trending similarly. One of the more, I think, precise levels that we're looking at the data now is on the actual roadways. And this is where we're really going to be able to get down to how traffic is changing. So thanks to the fantastic auditing work of our operations team, we have reviewed hundreds of thousands of our inventory over the past year, and have these very precise roadway assignments of not only where the inventory is located and the correct lat, long, and orientation, but also the roadways from which they can be seen. And so what we're doing here is we're geofencing the roadways, not just the inventory, but the roadways from which they can be seen. And we're looking at this mobile device activity within those geofences, and logging that information to be able to summarize by county, by area type, by road type, and by media type. Again, all knowing the representativeness of those devices, so that we can project to traffic volume adjustments by those areas. So if you haven't seen this, this is a little sort of insight on how Geopath is doing some of our auditing work. We actually are looking at, photos of inventory submitted by media operators. We are making sure that those roadways that are in that view shed or the contact zone actually do have a line of sight to those pieces of inventory, and we're using those geofences to then capture devices on those roadways as opposed to just in the proximity to it. We don't want to be getting residents that live near it and things like that. We want to get people that are traveling by those roadways because that's the metric that we're trying to use for impressions. So some of the dimensions that we're looking at this data, I think is important because one of the ways that you look at data is to make sure that it makes sense in the first place when you start summarizing it. And one of the ways that we're doing this is by road class. And so road class is important because the types of trips and the changes to those trips are going to change based upon what those roadways are used for. So when we're looking at road classifications, the ranges from like interstates, which are super high volume, very fast traffic movement, all the way down to like local roads. Now, local roads would be the road that you would turn off into your driveway. That's a local road. Or a local road could be one that you turn off to go into a business. So that's more around sort of like the function of that roadway, and the reason that people are using that roadway in the first place is where these classifications come from. So when we're looking at the classification summary of some of the activity data that we've been working on to date, we do see changes across the board, but what's interesting is that you're seeing different changes for different classifications of roadways. So interstates decreasing, but not nearly as much as you're seeing in other areas. And again, a lot of times, the essential supply chain is still operating. There's still traffic on the roadways. Things haven't come to a complete halt. We've just been much more selective on the types of trips that we're making. So those people out there, I hope everyone's appreciating their UPS driver and their mail carrier from afar, responsible distance as they're delivering our Amazon packages and our food deliveries. We're still seeing a lot of travel on those roadways, but it has been decreasing, just not as much as we're seeing in other areas. The other dimension, which I think is really fascinating, is when we're looking at this by area type or place type. And place type, for all those place-based media companies that are out there that have been working with us on the place-based measurement, this will sound familiar. A place type, roadways, in fact, are in neighborhoods that have a particular place type, like a core business district or a suburban area or a rural area. Other place types include shopping malls or airports, right? And so every single place type has different types of activity that we would observe in it. Core business districts, we see more activity during the work weeks than you do on the weekends. Rural areas, fairly stable because of just the nature of them. And so when we started summarizing this, we started seeing, again, patterns that we would expect to see given the changes that we know are out there. So central business districts, dramatic decrease in travel volume, whereas rural areas decrease as well, just not nearly the severity. So it really depends on where you are, where the inventory is located, and the type of trips that are traveling by those inventory as to how those traffic volumes are going to change. And that's what we have been working on, to get those adjustments by week to provide those impression changes. And again, those impression changes are not going to be reported by individual unit. We are going to be creating a report that summarizes those impression changes by market, by media type, by date range, with those averages and ranges. So this example, this would be the March 30th through April 5th section of the report, but you would have sections for every single week of the year going all the way back to the first week of 2020, because we want to make sure that everyone sees these travel patterns. Again, you're going to have, during the first couple of weeks of the year all the way through early March, increases in many markets. So the percentages are going to be up versus the forecast baseline, whereas we're now in this negative period, but it'll come back up. The other nice thing is that the the data that we are providing to our members and to the public in the case of the activity dashboard. So the activity dashboard is public. That site is going to continue to be public, travel.geopath.io, but both the activity dashboard and the impression report will be available in the Insight suite. And so what you'll start seeing soon is a new module showing up in the Insight suite, and we'll also be providing another training module on how to do this in the Smarter You. We'll also be creating a blog post with some FAQs around the 2 new data products, and so we'll be sharing that with all of the members and the public for those people that have access to it. So lots of stuff coming down the pike, a lot of stuff for you to go explore today. We encourage everyone to go look at this information, try to understand what's going on as best they can. That's what we're here for, and trying to make sure that you all stay as informed as possible. I think that's pretty much it. Any more questions out there, Scott?
No, we've been answering quite a few directly, as they've been some very specific questions, but the one other question that I do want to bring up is somebody asked, where can I find this information, this webinar? And if this will be available right after, as soon after the session as possible on our website. The one from yesterday is also on our homepage available, and you could click through there, right where Dylan showed you where you can access the tool. If you just scroll down a little bit further, you can click to the yesterday's webinar. This one will be there as well, and also on our YouTube channel, as well as on our Geek Out page on our website. If you scroll down to the Out of Home Office Hours section. And then just a couple of questions on the PDF export is question on whether it's only a state level report or if you can also do the CBSA level report in the dashboard. Dylan, are you? I'm not sure if I lost you.
Oh, no, sorry, I just put myself on mute, sorry. Are you talking about the activity dashboard or the impression report?
It's the question is the PDF report is only on the state level report, so I believe it's referring to the dashboard. But if you can just reply back to me and clarify the question, I can who the person who posted it, I can get some clarification.
I guess I can answer for both ways of interpreting it.
Right.
The activity dashboard, you can export both the CBSA and the state level images and charts. The impression report will only be provided at the market summary level, so CBSAs, DMAs, and so on.
Great. And if there are any other questions, please type them in. I think I don't see any other additional ones. But just as we're kind of closing down and if people are thinking of questions, we just want to say, if you can go to the next slide, Dylan, if you do have questions after this session, we're here to help. Please reach out to us at geekout@geopath.org. We can answer any questions on these tools. And as Dylan said, there's going to be other supporting products, information and resources coming out. If you do have any questions on these products or just anything else, geekout@geopath.org is a great resource. We can help you with anything in terms of login issues, if you need us to help pull data, etc. It's definitely a great resource for all of our members. All right. And if there aren't any other questions, we just want to say thank you to everybody. And again, please reach out to us on Geek Out.
Yeah, I want to reiterate, thanks everybody very much for showing up, chiming in your questions and support through all this. Hope everyone stays safe, and we'll talk soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.